Hello, everyone! Welcome back to my channel. Before we go any further, I need you to hear this like it's personal because it is. The moment a woman shares one specific thing with you, something she never says lightly, something most men overlook, she's already crossed an emotional line she can't uncross. And if you miss it, you might lose the deepest connection of your life without ever knowing you had it. So, if you care about understanding women on a level most men never reach, subscribe, like this video, and stay with me because what we're talking about today changes how you see love forever. And before we go deeper, I want you to answer something honestly in the comments. Have you ever had a woman suddenly become distant, even though everything seemed fine on the surface? No fight, no dramatic ending. Just a quiet, emotional shift you couldn't explain. I read those comments, and trust me, the answer reveals more about human connection than most people realize. My name is Lauren, and I want to tell you something most people will never say out loud. Women rarely fall in love during the exciting moments men focus on. Not during the expensive dinner. Not during the perfect text. Not even during attraction itself. A woman falls in love during the moments where she feels emotionally safe enough to stop performing. And if you've never understood why one woman deeply attached to a man who wasn't the richest, funniest, or most attractive in the room, this is why. Because emotional safety is intoxicating to the female nervous system. And I know some of you listening right now have experienced this from the other side without realizing it. Maybe a woman started opening up to you late at night. Maybe she suddenly shared something painful from her childhood. Maybe she admitted a fear she hides from everyone else. And in that moment, you thought it was just conversation. But to her, it was emotional exposure. It was risk. It was trust. This is where men unknowingly change the entire direction of a relationship. See, most men are taught to look for obvious signs of love: physical affection, constant texting, jealousy, attention. But women communicate emotional attachment differently. It's quieter, more psychological, more layered. A woman can flirt with someone and feel nothing deep. She can laugh with you, spend time with you, even desire you physically, and still not feel emotionally attached. But when she reveals the parts of herself she normally protects, that's different. That's when her heart starts stepping forward. And here's what makes this so powerful. Women are emotionally observant in ways many men underestimate. She is not only paying attention to what you say after she opens up. She's studying your energy, your body language, your facial expressions, your patience, your silence. Whether you become uncomfortable, whether you interrupt her, whether you make her vulnerability feel heavy or inconvenient. A woman can tell within seconds whether a man has the emotional maturity to hold space for her truth. And most men fail this moment without even knowing it happened. Not because they're bad men, but because they panic emotionally. Let me give you a real-life example. A woman sits across from a man she's slowly developing feelings for. They're laughing. The chemistry is there. Everything feels easy. Then suddenly, she says something small. You know, I actually have a hard time trusting people. Simple sentence, right? But psychologically, that sentence carries emotional weight. She's revealing a wound. She's exposing fear. She's inviting him into a protected space inside her mind. Now, watch the difference between two men. The first man immediately says, "Well, not all people are like that. You just need to think more positively." Sounds harmless, logical even, but emotionally, she feels dismissed. The second man pauses. He stays calm. He doesn't rush to fix her. He simply says, "That probably came from being hurt in ways people didn't fully understand." Do you see the difference? One man reacted to the words. The other responded to the emotion underneath them. And women never forget the man who understands the emotion underneath. If you're still watching, I want you to pay very close attention to the next part because this is where relationships are either deepened or quietly destroyed. And if this resonates with you already, take 1 second to like the video. It tells me these conversations matter to you, and it helps more people understand emotional connection on a deeper level. Now, here's what nobody explains about female psychology. Women spend a large part of their lives emotionally filtering themselves. They learn early which emotions are acceptable, which feelings make them seem too much, and which vulnerabilities caused them pain in the past. So, over time, many women become incredibly skilled at hiding emotional wounds behind competence, humor, beauty, independence, or even confidence. That's why vulnerability from a woman is never casual. When she says, "I don't usually tell people this," that sentence matters. When she laughs nervously before sharing something painful, that matters. When she says, "This is probably stupid," that matters too. Because beneath those words is one psychological question. Will you still see me the same way after this? And that question terrifies more women than most men realize. I once spoke to a woman during a counseling session who described the exact moment she fell deeply in love with someone. And what shocked her was how ordinary the moment looked from the outside. She wasn't swept away by romance. There were no flowers, no dramatic confession. She simply told him about the years she struggled with feeling emotionally abandoned by her father. She expected him to get awkward, change the topic, or give advice like everyone else had done before. But he didn't. He looked at her calmly and said, "That must have made you feel invisible for a very long time." And she started crying instantly, not because the sentence was magical, but because for the first time, someone understood the feeling without trying to erase it. That is emotional intimacy. That is what women remember. And here's the dangerous part. Men often think love is built through intensity, through impressing her, through keeping things exciting every second. But lasting emotional attachment is usually built through consistency during emotionally vulnerable moments. Can she trust your reactions? Can she emotionally rest around you? Can she tell the truth about herself without fearing judgment, withdrawal, or emotional punishment? Those questions matter more than your status, your money, or your social charm once real attachment begins forming. And this is where many men accidentally sabotage connection, because the moment emotions appear, they become solution-focused. A woman says she's anxious. He starts giving advice. A woman shares heartbreak. He starts explaining why she shouldn't feel that way anymore. A woman reveals insecurity. He immediately says, "No, don't think like that." Again, the intention is good, but emotionally, she often hears something completely different. She hears, "Your feelings are uncomfortable. Let's move past them quickly. I need to fix you so I can feel comfortable again." And the moment she senses that discomfort, her nervous system starts protecting itself again. This is why emotionally intelligent men stand out so powerfully. Not because they always say perfect things, but because they don't emotionally abandon her when vulnerability enters the room. That changes everything. And let me tell you something that will completely shift how you understand attraction. A woman does not fully relax into love when she feels impressed by you. She relaxes into love when she feels emotionally safe with you. Those are two completely different experiences. Impressing her creates excitement. Emotional safety creates attachment, and attachment is what makes her think about you at 2 a.m. It's what makes her replay conversations in her mind. It's what makes her slowly lower defenses she swore she'd never lower again. Now here's where it gets even deeper psychologically. When a woman feels emotionally safe during vulnerability, her brain starts creating associations between your presence and emotional relief. Oxytocin levels increase. Stress hormones decrease. Your presence literally begins to feel regulating to her nervous system. That's why certain men become unforgettable, not because they were perfect, but because they felt emotionally safe during imperfect moments. Think about that carefully. Anybody can stay present during fun. Anybody can stay charming during attraction. But the man who stays grounded when emotions become uncomfortable, that man becomes rare, and rarity creates emotional value. I want you to imagine something for a moment. Imagine a woman who spent years being misunderstood. Every time she expressed pain, someone minimized it. Every time she opened up emotionally, someone mocked it, ignored it, or tried to fix her before understanding her. Then she meets someone different, someone who listens slowly, someone who doesn't interrupt, someone who doesn't become defensive, someone who lets her feelings exist without trying to control them. Do you realize how emotionally addictive that experience becomes? Because emotionally exhausted people don't crave perfection. They crave peace, and peace is one of the deepest forms of attraction a woman can experience. This is why some women become deeply attached to men who aren't traditionally perfect on paper. The emotional experience outweighs superficial traits over time. A calm nervous system feels safer than temporary excitement. And here's another thing most men misunderstand. Silence is not failure during emotional conversations. In fact, silence handled correctly can deepen intimacy tremendously. When she opens up, many men become afraid of pauses. They think they must constantly reassure, explain, or prove understanding. But sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is simply remain emotionally present without rushing the moment away. A calm silence says, "I can handle this. You don't scare me emotionally. You don't need to perform around me." That is incredibly healing to a woman who's used to emotionally unavailable people. And let me be honest with you. Some women will test this unintentionally, not manipulatively, not consciously, but because their nervous system needs reassurance before trust fully forms. She may tell you something vulnerable and then immediately laugh it off. She may say, "It's not a big deal." She may change the topic quickly after sharing something emotional. But pay attention. Often that's not because she doesn't care. It's because she's watching whether you care enough to emotionally stay with her in the moment. That's the hidden test most men never notice. And if you fail it repeatedly, something subtle begins happening. She stops bringing you deeper parts of herself. Conversations stay surface level. The emotional intimacy plateaus. You think everything is fine, but internally she starts disconnecting. Women emotionally leave relationships long before physically leaving them. That sentence alone could save some of you years of confusion. Because once a woman no longer feels emotionally safe, attraction alone cannot sustain deep attachment forever. This is exactly why some men are shocked when a relationship ends. They say things like, "But we never fought. She never complained. Everything seemed normal." No, everything seemed controlled. There's a difference. Many women stop expressing emotional needs when they no longer believe those needs are emotionally safe to share. And silence in a relationship is not always peace. Sometimes it's emotional resignation. Now I want you to think carefully about your own interactions. Has a woman ever told you something vulnerable and you immediately tried to cheer her up instead of understanding her? Have you ever changed the topic because emotions felt uncomfortable? Have you ever joked during a serious moment because you didn't know how to sit inside emotional depth? Most men have, but awareness changes everything. Because the goal isn't perfection. The goal is presence. And presence is what creates emotional trust. Before we continue into the deeper psychological layers of why women bond so strongly through vulnerability, I want you to comment one word below: safe. Because the ability to make someone feel emotionally safe is becoming rare in modern relationships. And if you're learning this skill, you're already separating yourself from most people. And somewhere in the middle of all this, I need to say something important. If these conversations about emotional intelligence, attraction, and female psychology speak to you deeply, make sure you subscribe to Lauren Mind Game. This channel isn't about manipulation. It's about understanding the emotional realities people are often too afraid to discuss honestly. Because what we're talking about tonight goes beyond dating. It's about human attachment itself. And we're going even deeper into the hidden psychological mechanisms that make a woman emotionally choose one man over another, including the subtle mistakes that instantly break emotional trust without men realizing it, and the specific emotional behaviors that make a woman feel irresistibly connected to you over time. Now let's continue, because this next part is where things become deeply psychological. And honestly, this is the part most men never hear explained correctly. A woman does not emotionally attach to the version of you she sees when life is easy. She attaches to the version of you she experiences when emotions become uncomfortable. That is the real test. Because attraction can happen quickly, chemistry can happen instantly, but emotional trust is built in microscopic moments most people overlook completely. Tiny reactions, tiny responses, tiny emotional decisions that quietly tell her whether her heart is safe in your hands or not. And the truth is, women remember emotional moments with extraordinary detail. She remembers how your face changed when she admitted insecurity. She remembers whether you stayed calm when she cried. She remembers whether you listened carefully or impatiently waited for your turn to speak. She remembers whether you made her feel emotionally accepted or emotionally managed. That last one matters more than you think, because many men unknowingly manage emotions instead of understanding them, and women can feel the difference immediately. For example, imagine a woman saying, "Sometimes I feel like I'm hard to love." Now, logically, a man may respond, "That's not true. Of course you're lovable." Again, kind intention. But emotionally, she may still feel unseen. Why? Because reassurance without understanding often feels empty. But imagine instead, he says, "Who made you feel that way?" Do you see the emotional depth in that response? One response tries to erase the feeling. The other tries to understand its origin. And women emotionally bond with understanding far more deeply than reassurance alone. This is why emotionally intelligent men often create stronger attachment than men who are simply attractive or charismatic. Because emotional intelligence makes a woman feel psychologically held. And being emotionally held is one of the most intimate experiences a human being can have. I want to tell you about something psychologists call emotional mirroring. This is incredibly important, so stay with me here. When a woman expresses vulnerability and you respond with grounded empathy, her nervous system begins syncing with your emotional state. Your calmness regulates her anxiety. Your steadiness lowers her emotional defenses. Your attention tells her subconsciously, "I don't reject difficult emotions." And if she's spent years around emotionally avoidant people, this experience becomes profoundly powerful, because most people don't know how to hold emotional space anymore. Everyone wants quick fixes, quick answers, quick distractions, but very few people know how to sit with another human being emotionally without trying to control the experience. That's why emotional maturity feels rare, and rarity creates emotional attachment. Have you ever noticed how some people make you feel exhausted after opening up, while others make you feel lighter just by listening? That difference changes relationships. A woman may not consciously understand why she keeps thinking about a certain man, but often it's because her nervous system associates him with emotional relief. Around him, she doesn't feel judged. She doesn't feel rushed. She doesn't feel emotionally unsafe. She feels accepted, and acceptance is one of the deepest human cravings that exists. Now, here's where men accidentally destroy emotional trust without realizing it. Defensiveness. The moment a woman shares disappointment, hurt, or emotional discomfort, many men instinctively defend themselves instead of listening, and psychologically, defensiveness immediately shifts the emotional focus away from her vulnerability and onto protecting the ego. That creates emotional loneliness inside the relationship. For example, she says, "When you disappeared emotionally last week, it hurt me." And instead of hearing the pain underneath, he responds, "Well, I've been stressed too." Now, maybe that's true, but emotionally, she experiences it as abandonment in the conversation itself. She no longer feels emotionally prioritized, and over time, Repeated moments like this slowly teach a woman. My feelings are unsafe here. Once that belief forms deeply enough, emotional withdrawal begins. Quietly, subtly, dangerously. And this is important. Women rarely announce emotional shutdown immediately. First, they give less. Then they stop initiating emotional conversations. Then they stop sharing vulnerable thoughts. Then they stop hoping you'll understand. By the time many men notice the emotional distance, she has already been grieving the relationship internally for months. That's the tragedy of emotional disconnection. It happens invisibly. This is why emotional consistency matters more than emotional intensity. Grand romantic moments cannot compensate for repeated emotional invalidation. A woman would often rather have a man who consistently feels emotionally safe than a man who constantly creates excitement but emotional instability. Because unstable emotions create anxiety, safe emotions create attachment, and attachment is what sustains long-term love. Now, let me say something that may challenge some of you. A woman's vulnerability is not a performance for your approval. It is not an invitation for you to become her therapist, her savior, or the hero of the story. It is an invitation into emotional intimacy. There's a difference. Many men hear vulnerability and immediately move into fixing mode because fixing feels productive. It makes them feel useful. But emotional intimacy is not built through solving every problem. Sometimes it's built through witnessing someone honestly. That takes strength. Real strength. Because sitting calmly with another person's pain without becoming uncomfortable yourself requires emotional stability most people never develop, and women feel that stability deeply. I remember a man once asking me during a seminar, "What do women actually mean when they say they want emotional availability?" And I told him something very simple. Emotional availability means she can bring her full emotional reality into your presence without fearing rejection, ridicule, withdrawal, or emotional punishment. That's it. Not perfection, not constant talking, not dramatic sensitivity, just emotional safety. And ironically, the men who provide this best are often the calmest men in the room. Not the loudest, not the flashiest, not the most performative. The grounded ones, the men who don't panic emotionally, the men who can stay connected during discomfort, the men who don't disappear the moment feelings become inconvenient. Those men become unforgettable. And here's something deeply important that women rarely admit openly. When a woman feels emotionally safe with a man, she starts revealing pieces of herself she didn't even realize she was hiding. Her softer side appears naturally. Her affection deepens naturally. Her emotional openness expands naturally. Why? Because the nervous system only softens when it no longer feels threatened. This is why some women seem cold with one man and deeply nurturing with another. Often it's not personality changing, it's emotional safety changing. One environment activated defense, the other activated trust. That changes everything. And if you've made it this far into the video, I want to ask you something personal. Think about the women you've cared about in your life. Did they feel emotionally safe enough to fully be themselves around you? Or were they carefully filtering their emotions to avoid discomfort, misunderstanding, or judgment? Be honest with yourself. Because self-awareness is where transformation starts. And if this conversation is opening your eyes in a new way, take a second to subscribe to Lauren Mind Game and share this video with someone who needs to understand what real emotional connection actually looks like. Most people are starving for this kind of depth in modern relationships. Now, let's go even deeper into the psychology of why these moments become unforgettable to women. The female brain is highly responsive to emotional memory. Experiences tied to emotional safety become encoded with tremendous psychological weight. That means when she remembers you listening calmly while she was vulnerable, her brain doesn't store it as just a conversation. It stores it as emotional relief, as connection, as safety. And over time, repeated experiences of emotional safety build something incredibly powerful. Trust without force. That's real intimacy. Not pressure, not manipulation, not game playing. Trust. and trust changes the way she sees you permanently. Because once emotional trust forms deeply enough, a woman stops evaluating you only logically. You become emotionally significant to her identity and inner world. Your presence affects her mood. Your absence affects her emotional state. Your reassurance carries weight because she believes it emotionally, not just intellectually. That's when attachment becomes profound. But here's the painful truth. Many men only focus on how a woman behaves externally. Is she texting first? Is she affectionate? Is she attentive? But female attachment often begins internally long before external behaviors fully reveal it. She may already be emotionally investing while still appearing calm on the outside. Why? Because women often protect attachment carefully in the beginning, especially women who have been hurt before. So when she finally reveals a wound, an insecurity, a fear, or a painful memory, understand what's really happening psychologically. She's handing you emotional access. And emotional access is sacred. That moment can deepen love tremendously, or destroy potential trust entirely depending on how you respond. This is why emotionally careless reactions leave scars women remember for years. One mocking comment, one dismissive reaction, one emotionally unavailable response during vulnerability. Sometimes that's enough for her nervous system to decide, never again. And once emotional walls go back up, they often become much harder to lower the second time. This is also why patience matters so much in relationships. A woman may not open up all at once. Emotional trust usually happens in layers. First, she shares small insecurities, then deeper fears, then emotional wounds. Each layer is subconsciously testing whether emotional safety continues to exist. And every response you give either strengthens trust or weakens it. That's the invisible architecture of love most people never see. And let me tell you something else most men misunderstand. A woman is not looking for a perfect man emotionally. She's looking for emotional steadiness. You are allowed to be imperfect. You are allowed to make mistakes. You are allowed to not always know the perfect thing to say. What matters is whether your presence feels emotionally safe overall. Do you listen sincerely? Do you stay calm during difficult emotions? Do you make her feel emotionally alone when vulnerability appears? Those questions matter infinitely more than polished words. Because love grows best in environments where people feel emotionally free to exist honestly. And before I end this, I want you to remember one final truth. The moments that change relationships forever are rarely dramatic. Usually, they're quiet. A late-night conversation, a trembling confession, a vulnerable sentence spoken softly, a moment where someone risks being fully seen, and in those moments, your reaction becomes part of their emotional memory forever. So the next time a woman shares something vulnerable with you, don't rush, don't perform, don't try to become the hero. Just be present, listen slowly, respond gently, stay emotionally grounded. Because in that moment, she is silently deciding whether your presence feels like emotional danger or emotional home. And the men who become unforgettable are almost always the men who feel like home to a woman's nervous system. So ask yourself honestly, when someone gives you their vulnerability, do they feel safer afterward? Or smaller? That answer determines more about your relationships than attraction ever will. And maybe the deepest truth of all is this. A woman falls hardest not for the man who impresses her the most, but for the man who makes her feel the safest being fully human.